Hi there, and a very warm welcome to Season 6, Episode 2 of People Soup. It's Ross McIntosh here.
I just felt I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be there for other people in a way that would support them when I couldn't support them. And you've read the book, and you may have felt this, but it feels for me like very much like a conversation all the way through. It's a conversation. I tried to imagine that I was in a coaching session with somebody and coaching them and supporting them and being curious and interested in them. And a kind of genuine goodbye at the end of the book, which was heartfelt, So there was an element of me wanting to democratize coaching and psychology to have a bigger impact on the world than perhaps I could personally by writing it all in a book.
In this episode, I continue my chat with Charlotte Housden, who talks about her brilliant book, Swim, Jump, Fly, A Guide to Changing Your Life. The recipe she brings to People Soup is a hearty stock of change, infused with her own extensive research and experience, which is seasoned with psychological theory. You'll hear more about how she incorporated the experience of human change around the world and how the writing process was supported by a choir and a quartet. For those of you who are new to People Soup, welcome. It's great to have you here. We aim to provide you with the ingredients for a better work life from behavioural science and beyond. For those of you who are regular Pea Soupers, thanks for tuning in. We love it that you're part of our community. So let's crack on. For now, get a brew on and have a listen to part 2 of my chat with Charlotte Housden. Charlotte, I'd like to dive into your book, please. And I would like to start with my review, which I should tell the Pea Soupers you haven't heard yet.
I have not. I'm a little trepidatious.
But if you look at my smiling face, I think that should allay any fears. Right, here we go. Charlotte's spirit, energy and humour shine through each page of Swim, Jump, Fly. The way she draws upon a wide range of theory, philosophy and research makes this a comprehensive guide to change, both for the individual and the coach or practitioner. There are 2 shining stars of the book. The first is Charlotte's practical and accessible writing, and the second star is a collective made up of Charlotte's research participants, all 108 of them across 27 countries. Their experiences are woven throughout the book. Charlotte normalizes the human experience of change. We all struggle, and this book makes our struggles feel more relatable and gives us insights and exercises to help us find our way. Bravo.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. I really love what you've said, and particularly the piece about the stories, because I really wanted it to be lots of people in the room, not just me. One thing I love about being a coach is that I don't have to be the expert. I don't have to know everything. I am a facilitator. I'm not an expert. And in having all those people in the book, it was just a wonderful smorgasbord of different experiences and feelings and backgrounds and types of people. And I just loved the idea that I had this big choir behind me of people singing. I didn't want to be on the stage on my own. I think there was a little element of imposter syndrome. I don't know enough. I need other people there with me. Maybe my singing voice isn't quite strong enough, but if I have all of these people singing behind me, just think how wonderful that will sound. I did way too many. People tell me I needed to do about 10 or 20. I did a thematic analysis and they said, oh, you needed 10 or 20, not 108. But I went to 108 because I wanted to have a really good range of ages and genders and types of people from different places. And I also wanted to make it really accessible and interesting. I imagined the reader coming from different parts of life and society, and if they could see someone that was like them in the book, then it would normalize whatever challenges they were going through. Because when I started, I am white, middle class and female. And a lot of the people I started interviewing were white, middle class and female. And I just thought, well, this is rubbish. I need it to be broader and more interesting. So I purposefully went to 108 because I wanted to get to almost balance of genders and lots of different people from different places. And so it just feels like I loved the interviews because it felt like I was in this enormous hall full of people from different places all just chatting about their lives. And I enjoyed that part of it very much.
And I'd love to take a step back and say, when you started out doing the interviews, was it your intention to go to this many, or did it just grow as you went along? What happened? How did it grow like that?
So I was in the middle of a career sort of change process myself. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I've been working in consultancy for many years and had kind of fallen out of love with some of the things I was doing. But I didn't know what else to do because I'd always done either been a consultant or been in HR and run leadership development functions. And I didn't quite know what else to do. So I was sort of experimenting and trying new things. And I started out chatting to people who had gone through career change themselves and said, "Oh, how did you do it? What was the process?" And I ended up creating a semi-structured interview out of that. And then initially it was me gathering data for myself. It was very kind of focused on my own needs. But in the process of having this semi-structured interview, I realized that people were getting a huge amount out of that process of stepping back, looking at their career, their lives. And then it sort of snowballed because the people that I was interviewing then told other people about it. So, this is quite useful, exercise of like 40 to 60 minutes. And then it kind of broadened out from career to other things, other challenges that people were going through. So the question ended up being, how do people navigate change successfully? And many of them hadn't navigated successfully. And therefore we were also learning about what not to do next time. And it just kind of snowballed. It started off being by 5 or 10, and then 20, and then 30 and 50, and then ended up with 108. So yeah, it wasn't kind of where I imagined it was going to go, but it was lovely. I that was the part of the process that I loved the most.
And thinking about parts of the process you loved the most, I'm thinking, because for my master's in organizational psychology about 10 years ago, I did a thematic analysis. And I thought I was pushing the boundaries because I had 16 people. And that process of the thematic analysis, transcribing the interviews, reading them through, becoming immersed in them, looking for themes, my kind of home office turned into like a serial killer's lair, with bits of paper all over the wall, with connections between them. And I was immersing myself for hours every day in this and came out looking like some sort of crazed caveman. So that was with 16. So Charlotte, tell me how it was with 108.
Awful. I did not enjoy the process because when I started out, I thought, oh, this is fun. And I created all sorts of like charts, and I had color coding, and I had these themes that I was creating, these sort of, I had, in the end, it was like some 120 or something like that. But as it went on, I'd done the first 10 and then 20, and then this is great. And then I'm like, I still got another, how many to do? If I were to have my life again, I would not do 108. It became overwhelming. I got so lost in the data. It became a chore. But I got through it eventually, and I realized I'd hit the sides of the topic where I kept seeing the same things over and over again. And I thought, okay, I've done it. I did all that 108, but I think I've got enough themes now. And then you know how it works. You kind of get them down and down and down and down. I got it down to 18. But no, I would say that was not my favorite part, but I wish I'd done it differently. But actually, I think there's a richness. I mean, a lot of people give feedback to me and say the book is very rich. I think the richness comes from the volume of people I spoke to. So there is a benefit to it, but I found the process very difficult.
What was in your mind when you were doing the thematic analysis? Because I think if I've got the sequence right, it went to thoughts were shared in your blog. Did that happen alongside the thematic analysis?
I'd had some advice from somebody who's a journalist that not to write a book. And I was very disappointed by this idea that not to write a book, because the whole point of doing this research was to write a book. But I thought, no, he knows what he's talking about. I'll do what he says. And he said, practice your writing, hone your writing. I'd done a lot of writing in work because I had run a lot of internal communications functions, or when I was a management consultant, I was running all the communications for these big change programs. So I was very well versed at writing businessy stuff, but I hadn't really written from the heart. And he said the process of writing in a way that is attractive or engaging has to have a bit of you in it. And there's a vulnerability in that, which is quite unsettling when you start. The idea of sharing your inner world with other people. And even the point of pressing go on sending the blog is difficult, because I'd go over and over and over and over and over and make sure it's perfect. And so he said, get used to that process, get it out there, don't worry about it so much. So I took his advice and I wrote the blog whilst I was doing the thematic analysis and pulling out themes and sharing them. Some of it wasn't the thematic analysis, some of it was just my thinking. But I did that for 18 months every week, which was quite an endeavor. But I have to say, by the end of it, I became much better at crafting stories and thinking about the narrative arcs. And also, people say of my writing that it sounds just like me. So, it's a hackneyed expression, but having a voice. Apparently, I do have a voice. I have a style that people can recognize. Now, some people will hate it, and I'm kind of comfortable with that now. The idea that I have a particular way of writing that aligns to who I am. And in fact, my website, I've got a number of websites for my business, and I actually almost use them as an assessment center. For clients. So the writing in my websites is very much geared up to how I am, playful, quite humorous, light-hearted. And there'll be people who read it and think, oh, I couldn't work with her. She's just not the right person for me. And that's fine. That's good. Let's get that out of the way quickly. So my pipeline of new clients is relatively small, but my conversion rate is quite high because people have read in my blogs what I'm like, and therefore they kind of know what I'd be like to work with.
We'll include all the links to your websites in the show notes, but just tell us the names of the directions of the websites, if you would.
Yeah, so there's charlottesheridan.co.uk is my coaching site, and it's got all sorts. I do photography in my spare time as well, and I've got a number of coaching products that use my photography, so that's on there. And then I've got Swim Jump Fly, which is the book, swimjumpfly.com, and that's got lots of stuff that's useful, not just for people who want to read the book, who maybe can't afford a coach. The book is sort of self-coaching. It's kind of, if you can't afford one, it's your coach. So there's lots of lovely examples of exercises and things that people can do on there. But it's also really quite a useful resource for coaches and people developers too. So everyone's very welcome. Just take whatever they want from the site. And there's a third one, actually, Liminal Muse, which is the coaching product. So primarily for coaches and people developers.
And tell us a little bit about that Liminal Muse. These are cards, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We're not. I think we're not recording this on video, but I'm going to show you so that you can bring it live for you. But it's called Liminal Muse Conversation Cards, and it's basically based on my photography. And many of the images are abstract, so you don't really know what they are, and that enables people to see within that image what they want to see. And there are some, for example, there's one particular image that people tend to really enjoy using, and they all call it the log pile. And what's interesting about it is it's not a log pile, but I don't tell them that it's what it is, because if they want, a lot of people will say things like, oh yeah, I really want more structure in my work, or I want a bit more of a kind of stronger foundation, things lined up a bit more clearly. And if I said to them it wasn't a log pile, it would sort of undermine their metaphor or their storytelling around it. So I use this a lot in coaching. I use it in group facilitation as well.
Lovely. It's lovely just to glimpse a few of those. Just for the listener, there was one with some quite geometric shadows I could see. The log pile, for me, that was more a pathway, not regular paving slabs, but with a real richness of colour.
Yeah.
And there was another beautiful image you showed of a close-up of peacock feathers. And you're very much pinging all my circuits there, because I love to use visuals with coaching clients to help unlock thinking, different perspectives.
I partnered with an occupational psychology organisation who have a online platform called Deck Hive. And it's got, I think, 20 or so sets of cards on there. One of them is mine. I just offer them to them, and they sell them as part of their deck. But I use them all the time, and I used them the other day actually in a workshop I was running for the Association of Business Psychologists, and so that you can actually do it where it's interactive. It's like a whiteboard, but it's interactive online. So if I'm coaching with a client, just one-on-one, they can access and they can pull out the cards they want to play with, and I can see what they've chosen, and so we can use it that way as well.
It's great to know they're also available virtually as well as perhaps holding them up. Thank you. So that was quite a little tangent we took, but again, it speaks to your creativity and your desire to support others in unlocking what's meaningful for them. So I want to bring my attention and our attention back to the book. So when you started the research, the book was in your mind. Is that right?
Yes, very much so. I wanted to. In the past, I'd written a novel which has never gone anywhere. I might resurrect it at some point. It's about Neanderthals, but that's a whole other conversation. But I wanted to turn my attention to writing in a way that was not fiction, and to write a book that was going to be helpful. And it had struck me that there was only so many hours in the day. In our kind of work, we don't tend to do so much one to many. If we're doing coaching, it tends to be more of one to one. I do some group work. I just felt I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be there for other people in a way that would support them when I couldn't support them. And you've read the book, and you may have felt this, but it feels for me like very much like a conversation all the way through. It's a conversation. I tried to imagine that I was in a coaching session with somebody and coaching them and supporting them and being curious and interested in them, and a kind of genuine goodbye at the end of the book, which was heartfelt. So there was an element of me wanting to democratize coaching and psychology to have a bigger impact on the world than perhaps I could personally by writing it all in a book and making it more accessible. So from a cost perspective, coaching can be expensive. A lot of people can't afford it, but they might be able to afford a book. So that was my goal.
And don't underestimate how much your voice comes through. It really does feel like a conversation. And that is so skilled. So tell me a bit more about your creative approach.
Yeah. We talked in a previous episode about my energy levels, and that at the start of projects I often have a lot of energy, and at the end I have a lot less. And so I kind of know this. And before I started writing, I gathered together a group of people in a book club. And these were people who were blog readers or friends, or they were ex-colleagues or consultants. Some of them are therapists, psychologists. And I asked them if they would be interested in joining this book club. And it would be basically me sharing the ideas of the book every couple of weeks. And I would share with them the content of 2 chapters, not written, just ideas, and ask them for feedback. And this really helped me because it gave me accountability and deadlines, but also opened my eyes up to things that I was missing or couldn't see. And sometimes the feedback was fantastic and it very affirming. And sometimes it was very difficult because they might say, well, that was a bit rubbish and I don't like that idea. And I wouldn't suggest going down that route. And really, no, what are you thinking? And I found it difficult, but it was good because I would say the book is a whole heap better than it would have been. And I think it's building on that thing I said earlier about having the choir. So I have the choir of all of the storytellers, all the people who've been through change. And then I've got on the side here a little kind of maybe quartet of people who are also going to sing alongside with me, maybe when the choir isn't singing. So there was that sense of doing it together with others. It was a sense of, they had a sense of ownership to some degree. They all got a free book at the end of it, and many of them came to my book launch. But there was a sense of we did it together, which I super enjoyed.
And again, I see that courage in you, the courage to engage with the quartet as you go through the writing process, and a testament to you building relationships with them, the depth of the relationship with them, that they were willing to give you affirming feedback, but also like, Charlotte, what are you thinking of? Kind of feedback. That's such an interesting thing, and really does bring that extra richness, I think, the choir and the quartet.
Can I add one other thing, which I think they really helped me with too? One of my aims with the book was I'd read a whole heap of self-help books in my life, and some of them were great and some of them were awful. And I felt that they weren't evidence-based, a lot of them. It was, this is how I did the thing, and now you have to follow exactly what I did, and it will work for you. And I felt that wasn't a very good way to go because life isn't like that. And so I wanted it to be evidence-based, but I didn't want it to be one of these super heavy tomes, psychological kind of. I find sometimes reading psychology journal articles super hard because I just, it's a struggle. And I thought, if I struggle and I've got 2 degrees in psychology and a diploma in coaching psychology, what about everyone else? So I wanted to make it really accessible, but I also wanted to bring that kind of theoretical underpinning. And so that's how I got into ACT, actually, because a colleague of mine is an ACT practitioner and clinical psychologist and coach. And she introduced me to ACT and said, well, I think you should have some of ACT in your book. And so I started experimenting and reading up. At that point, I didn't know very much. And actually, if I were to go back and redo the book, I'd do it differently because I know more now. But it was a really lovely kind of introduction to more depth in the book. So I felt there was this sort of balance of theory, but also lightheartedness. And that was what I was hoping for, is something that was a bit of both. And one of my favourite bits of feedback is that somebody said that they thought the book was both light and deep at the same time. And I thought, oh, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted a range of storytelling, but also some theory behind it as well, some evidence based.
And I can see me, first of all, we were just talking, I can see me buying a hard copy as well, because I have the copy on my Kindle. But when I'm thinking about change and supporting clients or organizations, I want to be able to flick through your book and just think about how you presented that theory or the other theory or that research. So I can see it being a useful go-to book for me in that respect too.
Yeah, I mean, it was an unexpected audience, actually, because I had written it specifically for people who were navigating change and finding it tough and needing some help, and were not professionals, were not practitioners. And then a bunch of people started buying it who were coaches and saying, oh, this is really helpful, either because I was sharing ideas or theories or stories or ways of working that they nicked, totally happy for them to just take it and use it. Or another route that people were using was they were using it as a workbook. So they'd buy it for their client or suggest their client buys it. And then they'd go back to the exercises in the book and then use those exercises in between coaching sessions. So quite a lot of the people who bought it are using it as a way of supporting a client outside of the coaching session. So it kind of gives them a continuity of support when they're not having coaching. So I have to say, I would say probably 50% of the people buying it seem to be people, developers, therapists, coaches, psychologists. I was shocked by that. Not shocked, but surprised by that. One of my coaching colleagues showed me a book, a copy of it, and it's full of, those stickies. And she opened it up and it was sort of full of underlining and colours. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly how I meant for it to be used.
Wonderful. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind just talking us through the title, the 3 words, because I think that's a really powerful, one of the models in the book.
It comes actually out of two areas of investigation. One is a personal one, and one was the research. So personally, when I was going through this career shift, I felt like I had to change everything. I felt like everything had to be different because nothing was working for me. And there was this sense that's why I went off to think about alpaca farming. And I mean, how close is alpaca farming to management consultancy? I mean, it really is quite far away, or beekeeping or decluttering. So there was this idea that in order to create successful, appetizing change, I had to change everything. And in the research, and that was something I was kind of mulling over myself, and in the research, I came across a number of people who had tried the same thing, that they jumped out of what they were doing into something completely different. And they almost did it too quickly, and they didn't really know where they were going. And they felt they had to have this massive shift in order to create changes in their career. And over time, as I was doing the thematic analysis, it became very clear to me that there were different types of change. There were people who made smaller, more incremental change. There were others who maybe did slightly kind of bigger moves. And then there were those who made super big changes in their life. And some of them were successful and some of them were not. And it seemed to me that there was a particular theme here about the fit with someone's personality and their approach. That if one is kind of risk averse, the last thing you need to do is go off and just change everything all at once. It's overwhelming. And actually, you can change the size or the steps of the changes you make and make them smaller and more manageable. So I came up with this idea about swim, jump, and fly. Swim being moving in kind of close waters, and jumping being going a little distance but not too far, and then flying is like flying far away and doing something so totally different. And then I wanted to bring it to life with a kind of metaphor, and so I thought of animals that would fit those categories, and says the fish, there's a grasshopper, and there's a bird. And so throughout the book, it's full of cartoons of fish, grasshoppers, and birds, and it brings alive different people who I interviewed who made those shifts, sometimes successfully because it was well aligned with their personality and their approach, and others who went too far. And I was one of the people that went too far because I didn't need to shift myself considerably. Actually, what I needed to shift was some of the ways I did the work, not really the content. So I did want to do psychology. I did want to work with people. I did want to coach and train people, but not the way I was doing it, which was part of a big consultancy. So it's a core part of the book, which is find where you fit best for this moment, because it might shift, and then adapt your goals and your actions to fit you better, so that you're more likely to be successful. So yeah, that's a core part of Swim Jump Fly.
And I think it works really well. Those animal associations too really help embed. When I press pause on what I'm thinking about, I can then think about the fish, the grasshopper, or the bird, and it gives me more of a structure to hang things on.
People said they like that. They find that interesting. Others who didn't like the metaphor, didn't like the birds and the animals, I just say to them, just think small, medium, or large change. Because there are some people who find metaphors difficult.
And during the whole process of the book, what kept you going?
Partly the accountability, because I said I would do it. Having talked to my husband, he said I tend to do a thing where I say I'm going to do something, and then I get gratification for saying I'm going to do it. And he said to me, wouldn't it be just better if you actually just wrote the book rather than telling people that you were writing the book? And so there was this sort of, there was a bit of an element of, right, well, okay, thank you for that difficult feedback. I'm going to show you that I can do it. I also didn't want to let down all the people that I'd interviewed, because they were waiting to see themselves in the book. I didn't want to let down the people that had given me accountability in the book group. And I thought, come on, you've always wanted to write a book. You've half-heartedly written a novel. Now is your time. And so I just kept going. And I'm delighted I did, actually.
Me too. And did stuff show up along the way that really got in the way?
Yeah, defensiveness on difficult feedback. Well, they just don't understand well, clearly they don't understand what I mean, they just must be stupid, because clearly this isn't obvious to me. So there was trying to get over that sort of pride and damaged pride of like, oh, they think that's rubbish, I'm going to have to take the whole of that section out. Perfectionism, laziness, a whole raft of things. What will people think of me? Have I put too much of myself in? Is it going to be embarrassing? Because I've got there are, as you've read, there are some stories of me in there. And I think some of them I went back and took, sort of honed those stories a little. I thought, there's too much of me in here. This is not about me. So I took some of them out. Yeah, lots of stuff showed up. It was actually therapy, really. It was sort of self-therapy. I mean, in the end, I would say 2 years from start to finish, from the moment I started the research to the end of, I would say the book launch was probably the point at which I could let it go.
Blimey, that feels very quick. I'm just thinking 108 participants transcribing thematic analysis. That would probably take me 5 years before I even started to write. So that feels very, very rapid.
And can I say something about writing for any of your pea supers who are listening and fancy writing a book? And that when they say to you, oh, when you've written the book, that's not even half of the work. And you think, they don't know what they're talking about. Of course, it's more than half the work. I've written the book. It isn't. It's about a third of the work, because there is so much work put into editing, getting designers involved, getting editors involved, changing stuff, checking all of your data sources if it's not a novel. I found that tedious, that part, actually. I'm not good at that kind of stuff. I have to thank my husband for getting me through that. He was brilliant.
Thank you for the wise words from your experience. Now, would you have a takeaway for the pea supers?
Yeah, I want to reiterate the piece I said before. I want to go into maybe a little bit more detail on the how versus the what. I came across this in so many of the interviews that I ran, that people were mistaking the things they wanted to shift. They were thinking they had to shift the what piece, which is, I don't like being an accountant, or I'm not sure I like working in offices, or I don't like working in groups, or I don't like the content of what I do. I think they were kind of focusing on the wrong bit. They were thinking it was that they had to change their work. And actually, sometimes it can be the how of what we do, which is, do I want to run my own business? Do I want to work from home? Do I want to have more agency in the kind of work that I do? And actually, we conflate the two. And actually, those people that were really good at separating those two and working out, being very specific about what they wanted to change, were much more successful because they were focusing on the right thing. So I'd say, yes, think about the what. What is it that I do? So for you and me, it's working with people and coaching and doing training versus the how that we do it. Do you love doing it in person, Ross? Do you like doing it online? Do you like doing it in Spain where you live, or do you actually enjoy the piece of kind of going around the world and doing it in different places? So being very clear about the separation of those two different things, the what of it versus the how of it, and then work on the piece that is the most troublesome to you, as opposed to doing both.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That makes so much sense. And thanks for directing it using me as an example, because already getting me thinking. Because I think sometimes I have the balance right. And sometimes maybe I'd like to do more here in Spain with the ideas of things like retreats or
lovely. Yeah.
taking people out of their environment. So watch this space.
Would you involve bees in that?
Well, I think by then we'd have an established
bee colony.
Yes, and we'd have our outfits. So, yes, Pea Supers, watch out for news on bees as well. It's taken an interesting turn. There's potential collaboration. So, who knows? Or we might change tack, and it might be alpacas or almonds.
Or almonds. Yes.
Charlotte, thank you so much for joining me on People Soup. It's been an absolute joy, and very grateful for your generosity.
Oh, it's been lovely. I've so enjoyed the conversation.
That's it. The second part of my chat with Charlotte in the bag. Do go over to the swimjumpfly.com website to read a section of the book before you buy it. You won't regret it. Next week, I'm picking up on my collaboration with Dr. Richard McKinnon that we started in Season 5, and we'll be discussing values and how we can get clarity on our values. You'll find all the details for this episode in the show notes at peoplesoup.captivate.fm or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like this episode, we'd love it if you told us why. You can help me reach more people with the special People Soup ingredients, stuff that could be really useful for them. So please do share, subscribe, rate and review. Thanks to Andy Glenn for his spoon magic and Alex Engelberg for his vocals. But most of all, dear listener, thanks to you. Look after yourselves, Pea Supers, and bye for now.
Good. Can I give you some feedback? You have beautiful segues. I love. There were times when I took us off track, and I'd be like, "Oh, we're not in the core content anymore." But you're really good at going, right. So, I think what I'd really like to focus on, you just found that really very beautiful way of moving it back to where you need it to be.